Welcome to another episode of the Force Podcast. I am FIBA CEO and President David Schwartz. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the FIBA on Risk and Compliance Excellence, the Force Podcast. This one entitled The Evolution of Tools Employed in Addressing Unfair Trade Practices. President Trump recently issued a presidential memorandum titled America First Trade Policy, and he did this on January 20, 2025, and it outlined the immediate trade priorities for his administration. Since we are seeing a shift in the approach to addressing unfair and unbalanced trade, economic, and trade relations. Traditionally, economic sanctions have been one of the primary tools. However, President Trump has long been an advocate of tariffs, calling it, quote, the most beautiful word in the dictionary. President Trump believes tariffs are the key to boosting U.S. manufacturing by pressuring companies to relocate their production to American soil. Quote, the higher the tariff, the more likely it is the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff. Today, we're going to discuss this shift and why they are not sustainable long-term as a solution with Shalako Wiener, director at Higher Bridge Capital, provider of corporate financing for U.S. companies, and chair of FIBA's Trade and Working Capital Solutions Committee. Shalako, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. And this is a great opportunity to discuss a subject that is go deep in my heart. And I think if you let me, we need to go back a little bit on history. And I think trade in general is very young at the way that we know these days. So we go to maybe at the time of Bush, father, and Bill Clinton, when the World Trade Organization started in 95. So it's only 30 years. And they implement this idea that in order for the US to be more expanding the product and more integrated in the world, we should work on fair trade and open markets and destroy this frontier. But the reality is that we were naive in a way, and I think that where the Trump administration and everything that is happening had a reason if we go back 30 years ago. So we came out of the World War II. The world was saying, okay, how we create the ONU, we create all these entities to integrate the war and work in a more prosper way for humanity, and trying to balance, okay, I have this product, you have the other product, we can complement each other, and we can generate growth for our nations. The reality, and again, we've been naive within Western Europe, I was in Western Europe and not only the US, is that while we were looking to have a better quality of life, have more balanced life for our citizens, the rest of the world was not in the same mentality. Say, oh, how I can penetrate this rich market, which we're rich because we pay more to our people, we will create benefit. But the other countries, they just want a piece of the apple, but they don't want to put anything on the table. So again, I don't want to go full in history, but I think it's important that we were looking for something that was fair, balanced, open market, that we can trade fairly between us, and people can have their salaries, their houses, their school, all that around the world. And then through these 30 years, we realized that then nobody's playing fair, but everyone still want a piece of the apple. So as you mentioned, when we see that, what happened? We start with sanctions. So, and I'm going to put this as a great example. I will start with Cuba. And we know everything that happened in Cuba, for example, with the Russian, and it was a major producer of sugarcane. It was a product that we all need, and sugar has been a commodity that we've been struggling to last year. But then we realized that people were underpaid, that there was a dictatorship, that people didn't get access to education, to hospital, even though the Communist Party was selling that they have all of that, but it's not true because no one is going to leave their country. They have all this benefit. So little by little, say, well, we have to put sanctions. But what happened with sanctions is it doesn't matter when you have a dictator or a communist because they live well and they don't care about their people. So sanctions through the years has been failing. So we come back to the idea, and again, interrupt me every time because I can get very
Oh,
passionate on all these
yeah,
things.
let's just expand on that because, our theme in 2025, given everything that's happening, has been we're living in interesting times. And I think this is one more example to that. So maybe you can discuss in a little more detail, why you believe, and I think you've given already one good example, but why you believe that sanctions are not a sustainable long-term solution.
Well, at the end, sanctions are impacting the regular people. They're not really impacting, and I would say maybe in the case of Venezuela, it's been different because the target of sanctions is being more to the government entities and to the political leaders, where we see more broad sanction like we had with Russia and maybe other countries, at the end impact the people that empower at the end the dictators in a way that they get more strong because say, oh, you're starving or you don't have all these products just because the sanctions. So sanctions they have been proven to these 30 years that do not level and don't take down governments. Of course, sanctions could be interesting when we talk about maybe certain sector like arms. We don't want to deploy any of our technology or arms to go to these countries that they're not the enemy countries. But when we start targeting the economy of this country through sanction, at the end we create more problem than solutions. So
Yeah, and I think you gave two good examples. If we look at Cuba, decades of sanctions, and as you said, the only people that have been impacted are the citizens, right? They're living in terrible conditions. In the meantime, the government has enjoyed a pretty good life during all this time. And the same in Venezuela. I think the difference in Venezuela, of course, is there's such a large Venezuelan diaspora population here in the United States, and many of them still have the free travel back and forth. That some people have felt it, and it always impacts the poorer people more than anybody else. And I think that's the tragedy of it all. So in your thoughts, you're talking about tariffs, as is President Trump. But what are the challenges in the tariff strategy?
so that's to the next example. Like let's agree that sanctions do not comply the purpose to destabilize government or turn around economies in order that we have more friendly country and the quality of the citizen. Because at the end, the major challenge is the quality of your citizen and your population. So then let's move to tariff. Tariff is very interesting, and I think it's a great tool on a short-term fix in order that to level up that unfairness competition between countries. Why? Because when we try to develop or manufacture or any product or service in the United States or Western Europe, we cannot compete with this country that they borderline slavery. So when we have to pay a salary of 5,000, 10,000 a month, then we have to compete with the same guy that do the same product, and then they're paying $1 or maybe $10 a month. So it's impossible, and it's totally unfair to compete because the first raw material that you need is humans, which with technology is changing, with artificial changing. So tariff, what they do is they level up the cost of the goods when we import them through the local production. The impact of that is that now we have to change as a culture, we have to change as a society, that we're going to have to pay more because now is the only way that we produce locally, and the local producers or the local manufacturer or the local service, now he can compete with the one who's doing unfairly abroad. But what happened with tariff is that then this idea of allied country or friendly country, we start getting in a trade wars. So we see that with Canada and Mexico right now, and South Africa, there's another one. So we start getting this trade war and this retaliation because now these people that were competing unfair, now they feel that they're being fair because in the mentality, everyone is always fair. Everyone is always innocent until you prove they're not. And everyone wants a piece of the apple, which is the major market that everyone fights these days. Is still the United States. Like I had a conversation with a group out of Africa, which have been receiving all this large investment from China and India. And when you ask this African country, okay, you get all those investment, you give them away all your raw material, they send you like very expensive product back, but what are you selling as a company to this country? Say, no, I don't have any clients in India or China. They don't have it. So anything that Africa can produce these days, any product, their natural market going to go back to the US, which is the largest minority, or Western Europe. So tariff create this tension in order to find a local solution, but it create a worldwide challenge. So that's and then the increase on consumer costs. You think that your local now citizen say, why I have to pay more when I used to go and pay less because the product was coming from this third world country at a cheaper cost? I say, well, because you are impacting your local economy, you're impacting your network, you're impacting your country, and we create a dependence on third country that not necessarily want have our best interest. So tariff is great to level up in the short term, but there is more to do.
Yeah. And speaking of more to do, so you've written a white paper, and that's going to be published shortly, where you actually propose an alternative to the president's plan, this idea of tariffs, and that would be a domestic content requirement strategy, which we have seen in certain industries, right? The auto industry, and that was kind of successful, right? We have large plants, particularly in the southeastern United States, from foreign car manufacturers, Honda and others. So share with us, explain with us a little, what is this approach?
So what President Trump did is great. Say, guys, we're gonna play fair. So if you want my market, you want my buyers, you have to level up, and I'm gonna impose this tariff to level up in order that my industry can grow. But again, as I mentioned, that's a short term. So what is next and what we're looking for? Okay, you want the US market, you want the Western Europe market, and this is not something that I create out of my mind. This is happening in other countries. Is create what we call a US content or a Western Europe content. So if you want to address this market, then we expect that you have a certain investment in this market, because you're not going to get the hanging fruit and then leave and don't create, wealth for us, because they're taking all our wealth abroad. They use it against us, and we are destroying our quality of life, our intellect, our brains. We have the greatest ideas in the United States, like we're talking about AI, we're talking about microchips. And you mentioned, we did with the car industry, and you have people like Toyota, which is one of the greatest examples. Almost every Toyota they sell in the US these days is almost 100, I would say not 100, but maybe 60, 70% with US content. So what I'm proposing in my paper is like, we need to migrate from tariff to US content. At least 60% or 70%, that's the word discussion. And US content doesn't mean that the raw material or maybe the product, is that you have to have at least certain service or product on a 60% on any product that I want to sell to our market. And this is not new. Brazil, if you try to sell a turbine in Brazil, they have to be assembled or manufactured in Brazil. So Brazil is a very protective market. And again, I'm all over the world, but I have an example that it's been the risk, and that's why I'm pushing more to a 60% and more than that. I think Brazil have more than 60, is because when you create too much local content, then your industry become lazy, and this we have to be careful, because we love to make money. We're a capital country. We're a country that we want to be the best of the best, and more under this administration. But we don't need to protect too much to a certain level that will lose competitive. So that was our thinking, 60%. So meaning that you want this market, okay, build your manufacturing here, or bring your service, or hire a team in the US to lead the sales team, to lead the development team or the engineering team in the US to adapt. So other countries are going all the way almost to 100%. That if today I want to open a company in the Middle East, and I'm not going to name country in order to not get trouble, you need to hire the same amount of local people in that country, citizen of that country, they need to generate the same amount of money that the force that you come from abroad or the product that you come from abroad. So this Middle East country, I mean, okay, you want my market, you want my benefits, my tax benefit, you want my paradise. Okay, whatever you want to invest and whatever money you're going to make, I want 100% on getting to my local citizen. So this idea is not new, but it's the way to go in order to have a healthy competition and a fair. Because at the end, what everyone wanted is the U.S. market, and in a way, the Western Europe market. I always bring Western Europe because example.
Right.
And when we talk, and this is going to be a little maybe controversial, we talk about migration. You don't see people migrating illegally to all these countries that compete unfairly on salaries and product. You don't see that issue over there. Why you see it here? Because here we care about the quality of life of our citizens. Here is we want to level up, we want to be fair, but we, in a way, we try for so many years since '95 when the World Trade Organization was created, when it was the idea of President Bush and followed by Clinton, we want a fair world that all the economies grow. And honestly, they've been growing. We are the one who not growing, and we're not taking advantage of what we have done. And I think,
let me ask you something. So sanctions didn't work. Tariffs, maybe in the short term, work. So why would this approach be more successful than those approaches?
Well, it's again, I would say the common sense is the less common that we have. So this approach already have some case of studies, as you mentioned. Defense. We are the stronger country in defense product. Why? Because they demand U.S. content. So if you try to sell any to our Department of Defense, any airplane, boats, tanks, even I think even uniforms, they need a U.S. content. So that's been a success story. Our defense industry is one of the strongest one of the most wealthy one, and one of the most advanced, because we push that U.S. content. Maybe we didn't do it for economic reason, we did it more for a strategic reason, but at the end, it came back to economics. We see with the space race, there is a lot of U.S. content. When we go to the electrical car, we've seen how we've been developing those electric cars, and maybe we make the mistake when we start like thinking, oh, let's do it in other countries because they're going to be cheaper. And then, oh, maybe it's not such a good idea because now they steal our ideas, they steal our technology, and they come back. But they continue to underpay their employees. They continue to have cheap labor.
And I think you mentioned a very key point right there. When we export our manufacturing, and as you said earlier, our ideas overseas, then we lose it or they steal it. So our competitive advantage diminishes. And I think that is one very important benefit of what you're proposing.
Well, we're going to see that with the aviation industry. So we know all the struggle that Boeing is being through, but in a way these days, all that technology, all of that advance that we did with Boeing, now it's being stealed by our competitor, and they're going to come with a very quality, similar product and cheaper. But it's not cheaper because they were like a genius to create a cheaper product. It's cheaper because the engineer over there costs 10% of what an engineer in the US costs. And it's unfair for that engineer. It's not like we overpay, because if you see our state of the economy and what is good, what is happening with this administration, that we get so much disruption that people start like thinking about, oh, we are being overpaid. And when you see your end month check and we leave pay your check and say we're not being overpaid, is that we are being competing unfairly with people that underpay, that live on very poor condition. And here to have a decent life these days, it costs too much, and we cannot catch up. So we need to stop, I would say, sharing our knowledge with those that don't play unfair. And the only way to play unfair, sanction didn't work, tariff is a short-term solution, is US content. If you want my market, you need to invest in my market, as Brazil did, as the Middle East is doing. And in a way, I would say China and India, they don't have that problem because no one want to get those markets yet. They will come. They will come. That they will be very interesting market, but no one want to go over there to compete. And this is going to be funny. One time, and you and I, we know very well this country, like Chile. One time I had this conversation with Chile, and Chile is an export country. They export everything. And they say, whoa, we are open market. Why you don't come and bring your product? Say, why am I going to bring my product to a country like 15, 16 million people? Far away, the logistics is a nightmare. Is most so is they have a natural barrier to enter that market, and it's not big enough. But yeah, they love open market. They want to sell the product all over the world. Yeah, because they need it. Here is the inverse. We are the stronger market.
No, and I think another interesting conclusion to draw is sanctions, tariffs, probably more political, right, in nature. Whereas this idea of having to make your product here, use our content, is more about trade, right? It's more about the product itself and not so much trying to punish a country.
And that's where you get where I want to get totally. And I'm a trade guy, so I'm very so that's when you really put the added value on what type of manufacturer we want to build. So we're gonna be adding those value here. We're close to the market. Better for even from the logistic point of view, because we can. It's like IKEA. IKEA is a great idea because they reduce the cost of logistics because we are the value added guys that have to manufacture the product in our home, but shipment is flat. It's in a box. It's super flat. It's super cheap. Like Amazon has been doing, like a lot of it that move around. So why we have to bring a furniture out of Asia or Northern Europe already assembled when I can push that value added? They push to the extreme, and they were brilliant, the Swedish guys, in order that we are the labor. But that added value, we should bring it to here. Then the skilled workforce. Maybe there is certain product we don't need our skilled workforce to dedicate time, but when it's bring to our market, then we need that. I was mentioning about our sales team, our marketing team, our AI. How we're going to penetrate the U.S. market and that, and then is a more sustainable trade practice. Is going to benefit everyone, and it's going to level up, and we're not going to have that struggle where we feel that we be screwed up by everyone that want our market.
No, and I think seeing this plan in action, which we are seeing. With some of these, as we said, the auto dealers were really the first ones that were forced to have this type of content included. And as you said, 60%, 70%. I mean, obviously, 100% is not going to work. Nobody's going to say, well, so you're telling me not only do I have to open my factory in the United States, but I have to source all of the raw materials there. And we may not even have all the raw materials. But I think labor is obviously, for us, the most important raw material. And it is the most costly, at this point in time. And that leads to what you were saying about the quality of life and why we see that migration from those countries to the United States, because they know that they're going to benefit much more than working here than they will in their countries. So I think our time has run out, and this is a fascinating subject, and with everything that's going on today, and we look at this today as the 24th of February. So really, we're only about 35 days into our new administration. So there's much more to go, and there'll be much more to discuss down the road, because this strategy will probably force countries to redefine their trade policies, making it, as you said, fairer, more competitive market, while making sure that those people that are doing that work will benefit, share that prosperity with them, and that'll help drive economic growth. So, Shalako, thank you again for your time and sharing your perspectives with us. Everybody will keep an eye out for your paper. I think it definitely has some very, very interesting perspectives. Now, if we can just get people up north in Washington to listen and adopt that strategy. So,
No,
Shalako, thank you again for sharing your perspective.
thank you, David. And just a final sentence, like we need to move from a price war to a value creation. That's the trade shift that in policies that we have to look at. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
No, great final point. Thank you. And you can hear more about this. You'll hear more from Shalako and other experts at our upcoming 25th annual AML Compliance Conference here in Miami, March 24th through the 27th. See you all there. Thank you for joining us in this new episode of The Force. Write to us at marketingfiba@fiba.net and send us the topics you would like us to cover in our next episodes. For more information on the benefits and value of being a FIBA member, visit us at www.fiba.net.